All right, so I see some people on Facebook now, and so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Logan LaPierre. I'm the program manager with the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. We have been taking a very short break from Ask the Experts, but we are back, and we're continuing our series where we kind of discuss some very basic, kind of returning back to basics for businesses in our area. Back in the fall, we talked about creating a business plan and kind of deciphering what a business plan is, followed by financial statements. And we thought it might be a good idea to discuss business expansions. So if you're looking to expand, this is going to be a great topic for you. We have a couple attorneys from Gravis Law who themselves have experienced great expansion in the, recently, I would say. Before we get started, I'll just point everyone out. If you do want to go back and watch any of the prior episodes, they're on Facebook and our YouTube channel. So I would definitely recommend you go back and view those after this session. And of course, this one is recorded. So after this morning, it will be posted on our Facebook page and our YouTube channels as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Sakamoto with STCU. Kevin is the senior commercial banker with STCU, and he will go ahead and take it from there.
Fantastic, thank you, Logan. We're fortunate today to have Reuben, Ortega, and Joshua Bam from Gravis Law, in addition to being the experts in terms of laws and regulations and compliance. I think we're fortunate to have the breadth of experience that they have with small to mid-sized businesses, public and private companies, familiarity with both debt and equity instruments, which can be interesting to a lot of business owners out there, familiar with mergers and acquisitions, purchases and sale of real estate, as well as purchases and acquisitions of other businesses as well. So we're looking forward to today's session, and we'll turn it over to Josh and Reuben.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Really appreciate having us today, and the fact that we're experts. I know we've seen a lot of stuff. We've been through a lot of stuff. You know, you see a lot of businesses close, and to some extent, a lot of businesses open during COVID. So we've at least seen the gambit of what's going on. So that part's been kind of fun. And Reuben's seen a lot from Idaho, from Boise there, and also from Seattle. I'm lucky enough to work in Seattle in the Tri-Cities. And even during COVID, it's been pretty busy, and there's been a lot of acquisitions and stuff going on. And we'll explain some of that stuff and the practical considerations as well.
And I think, Josh, as you get started, one of our biggest hopes is that we don't spend tons of time talking, that we find this to be an interactive session, and that as we get questions, we can answer stuff that's super applicable to you, and then otherwise we'll just kind of give you some of our experiences. So yeah, keep going, Josh.
Agreed. Thanks, Reuben. So this is basically an overview of what we see in terms of business expansion. First, we're going to talk about what triggers business expansion, when people think it's useful to start expanding or not expanding. Then we're going to talk about how businesses expand, what the real paths are to getting there. Then I think a little bit is useful in exploring some of the financing. That usually is a strong component in expansion, unless you're just doing a really great job. Maybe you have a weed shop and you just have a lot of money, and then it's pretty easy to expand, but not everybody does. On the back end, we're going to talk about managing expansion, because success can also be a killer of business. And then we're going to just go over some of the traps and the tricks practically, just so you can see how it might look in reality. If there's anything in particular anybody wants to chat about, let us know, because we'll make sure that we chat about it as well. So I've heard that my line is not very clear. Can you hear me a little better now?
Sometimes Josh gets a little distracted with the squirrels, and he'll talk to the side a little bit. I think his mic. I think you're better now, my friend.
Okay. Thanks.
Let us know though, for sure, guys. I appreciate the feedback on that.
No, absolutely. The squirrels are nice. Thanks, Reuben. So just getting into some of the triggers of expansion. What we see generally for our clients, whether it's manufacturing or restaurants or kind of anything, we're just talking about general business at this point, unless anyone wants to speak about specifics. But for us, a lot of the triggers for expansion come around like net revenue. You're making a lot of money, and so it's pretty easy to expand, and it's a very easy choice because if you do expand, you will make more revenue. Maybe there's a gap in the market, and so it's pretty easy to go put a product in that gap and really just take all the revenue. One of those things that's really easy to see is like I do work in a lot of cannabis law and a lot of manufacturing and stuff. And so some of the stuff that we're seeing is like if there's like medical devices, there's sometimes huge gaps in medical devices now that technology is progressing. So it's pretty easy to go put a product in there. Some of the stuff that we also see in terms of triggers is COVID. There's a business that goes down. So there's a place to fill. So you can either go buy that business or you can just take those clients over. And now with idle and some of the at least low interest rates over the last few years, we're seeing that there's more and more available financing. So just to explore some of those pieces a little bit, and I'll let Reuben here take over.
No, I was just thinking in terms of on the revenue piece. I work with a lot of software companies, and that's they just spend money like it's going out of style, and they don't really make profits for a little while, but their revenue is a really big trigger on whether they're ready to expand. And I think that if you're not tracking your financials really well, or you don't have somebody on your team that's helping you kind of understand, not only your profitability, but generally your cash flow, you could be surprised by a ton of revenue, but then realize you're going to burn through it super fast. And 3 months down the line, you've run out of cash again. And so the expansion was too fast. And so a lot of times when we talk to clients, this isn't just there's not just legal advice that we give, but there's a lot of collaborating with their whether it's a CFO or an accountant, bookkeeper, to kind of make sure that expansion makes sense on that side. Though I do like working with those the M&A and the acquisition space and the selling space. I think me and Josh were talking earlier that sometimes clients get a little greedy and they're doing awesome and wonderful, and their business is climbing and growing, and it's time to get out, and they wait a little too long because they're like, how much higher can it get? And so I found that I think these are all great points to kind of figure out when to expand and when not to expand. And personally, given what's going on geopolitically in the world, whether Russia and Ukraine are going to war, or whether the stock market's going to correct, or whatever happens, I think there's always plays to be made, and it just takes some good analysis and some thought, both from the legal and the financial perspective, on whether it's time.
Agreed. And at least if you're moving on the net revenue side, as you said, Reuben, like you'll be able to see that on the books. Someone will be able to say, oh yeah, this location's profitable. It's going to be really easy to go franchise this restaurant or coffee shop. So that organic growth is nice, but it doesn't always happen, unfortunately. What we generally see more is people are using financing to take over competitors or grow their business, and that's just like a hard push in general.
One of the things that also has come up, people went and got the PPP money or the EIDL, the economic development loans. And those are restricted, right? You can only use those for ordinary business expenses. But what they've been doing is they've been putting that money in this bucket, and then they've still been making money. But this other money can be used for other things like expansion. And so they've been using the 2-bucket approach and really staying compliant, but getting a loan from the government because of what's been available through the SBA has really been a boost to a lot of my clients, and they found the opportunity to kind of shift where they're spending their money and taking the opportunity to expand. It's been great.
And if you're lucky enough to get EIDL, I mean, that's a broad range of expenses you can cover. And a lot of people are saying, if Omicron hopefully isn't going to shut us down, then there is going to be a need for services, and it's going to be maybe remote, or there's going to be a different type of service that I can fit into, but it's worth expanding and coming out of COVID better than I went into it. And so some of that stuff is still available. Interest rates are probably going up, this year for a bit. Maybe they'll come back down at the end of the year. I think that we're starting to see, at least I'm starting to see, that SBA and hard money lenders are sort of starting to figure out what the Fed's going to do. And at this point, I think it's a really slow easing. I don't think it's going to be like a recession necessarily in 2023. But I mean, you guys have watched the stock market. You could see the irrational exuberance. And I think that lenders are starting to see and investors are starting to see that as well. So I think there will be a tightening. And so if you're looking for financing, like it probably is now or 2023 maybe. And so, just full disclosure on that side.
100% agree.
Questions, concerns, anything we can chat about here? I'm working with some tech clients now who are, so just in terms of the market gap, they've developed something that almost no one else can develop, and that it's such a complex algorithm that only 18 people in the US might understand what it does. And so they're going to fill a market gap, but they're also like, wondering, do we go patent or copyright the software, because then we're going to make it public and everyone's going to know. And to some extent, you run with that as long as you can, because it's going to be so difficult to replicate that no one really is going to know how to do that. And then you patent it, within the 1-year timeline and copyright and all that kind of stuff. But some of the stuff in the market gap is you have something that no one understands or can't create, and those have been really, really fun companies to work with too.
Yeah.
So in terms of how you get there, in terms of expansion, I think we talked about this a little bit. You can get there by actually using net revenue. You can get there by actually creating products. You can get there by creating partnerships and joint ventures, by offering like joint coupons or specialties or events, or teaming with folks that somebody's doing like marketing and making a percentage. There's commission agreements. There's a whole bunch of ways to work together in the middle as well.
I've seen those joint ventures a lot in the real estate market, just so you know, Josh, like there's these construction companies are slammed, and there's like, people are having a hard time getting supplies. And I've seen a number of these real estate developers team up so that they can go make these big orders, and they'll buy a bunch of lumber or steel. That's what's short right now. And so they can secure the price, and it'll help them all get their jobs done. And all they have is a side agreement to go buy a bunch of stuff together. And even that has helped them, been a creative solution I've seen, given the toilet paper shortages of 2020 and such.
Agreed. And then everybody in that JV or that team expands, everyone grows together. And everyone who doesn't, potentially who's a competitor, maybe they're a target for an acquisition next year. So no, I 100% agree. I think to some extent, yeah, working together is going to be the next few years. I also think that, we're not out of the financing game yet. I do think that there's still some stuff left over for financing, especially if you have hard assets like real estate or other things, and you're going to go acquire stuff. If you're in real estate now, you're not going to stop buying, probably throughout 2022 and 2023. So if you're in commercial real estate like this, you're probably still expanding. And so some of those industries really have no issues going to the COVID side. Reuben, did you have anything there?
No, not really, my friend.
So in terms of actually getting money, which I think is kind of a big deal, there's a couple ways to do it. You can go to the bank and ask for money.
Wait, Josh, are you not offering people to give people money?
I will give you money at 24% interest, 24-day term. But that is the thing. That's kind of what's been happening lately. There's a few ways to go get actual money. You can go to a commercial lender and the rates have been good, but the guidelines are strict. If you go to a private person who's going to give you money, some of the rates have been a little bit higher. We've seen like you could go to a financer or investor or somebody and maybe get like $100,000 to expand your business or cover some things while you expand. But maybe you're looking at 12 to 24% interest. And is that a good idea for your business? I think that really depends on what you're going to do and what the revenue looks like on the other side. So there's a few channels to really go and get debt financing. Obviously the SBA, obviously Kevin and Rebecca, just a shameless plug just in case. And but there are some of those lines of financing that are still open. So I think if you're looking to expand or if you're looking to cover stuff, expenses or refinance debt, like this is definitely the time to do it. Just one more time. There's a difference here between, you know, and then there's also factoring on the other side, which is using some of your accounts receivable and stuff to see if you can secure money. So basically, a lender would say, "Hey, here's money, and we'll secure it against your accounts receivable. We now own X% of it." There's a few of those kinds of things. Almost anytime you go and get money from the SBA or wherever it may be, they're going to ask you for a personal guarantee, which says, "Hey, I promise that I will pay back this money even if my business can't." And Reuben shaking his head because as lawyers, I hate those. But you know, you have to evaluate really if that money is worth it, what the revenue looks like on the other side, and there's risk and reward. Absolutely.
Totally. And, you know, I just had a client come up to me the other day and they said they got this huge PO from Walmart and they're not even sure they can fulfill it and they're super excited and their business is growing. But they don't have the capital to get the raw materials to fulfill the order. And so, you know, oftentimes those sort of things, people will lend on a PO that's even less than a AR receivable. But it's, again, rates and risk that you have to balance. And that's another reason, you know, one thing I do enjoy when clients come to me is I have kind of a good insight on where the market's at. And when somebody says, you know, 24% interest plus personal guarantees plus 40% down for this loan, like we know that that's terrible, right? But we do know that, like, you know, where the rates are and what makes sense from a market standpoint. So be interesting to understand kind of how that affects our client, and then we can give them kind of a perspective on the market.
No, great. So I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So somebody asked, if a person hasn't started a business and from out of state, is it possible to start and expand the business? Yeah, it's obviously possible to start a business for sure. You can start a business in any state, and then you can either go register a new business in another state, or you can register that same business in other states. So that's a really good question.
Yeah. Just as a real life example of that, I have some clients that are really interested in privacy. And so they asked me to start their company in Wyoming because in Wyoming, it takes a horse, a cowboy, and a court order to figure out who owns the company. And what that's done is because they're a remote entity, they basically picked Wyoming as their home base, filed there, have some privacy, and you know, they do have to do filings in other states. They have one person working in Washington, one person working in Kentucky. But the point is that where you file your entity and where you create your business is different than where you're actually doing business. And those, we need to kind of analyze both paths to make sure that, one, we're tax efficient, but also we're compliant.
And they can be the same place. I mean, if you're starting a coffee shop and you know you're going to do all your business in Washington, I probably wouldn't say go start a Delaware company and come do your licensing in Washington. But if you're starting something with investors or that needs privacy, like maybe you're like you're a hardcore real estate broker and you just don't want your name on everything except your listings, you know, there's some of those reasons as well.
Yeah, but you know, and if we're going to put a plug in, I mean, Tri-Cities is a great place to start a business, guys, right? And the market here in the Tri-Cities is wonderful, right, Josh? I mean,
that's true.
You guys have been busy as all get out, from my understanding, and I think that there's some, you know, right now, I think from my standpoint, people are starting businesses where they can find people to work, right? They're looking for good people, and I do know the Tri-Cities is full of good people. So
that's the other part of expansion. That's a really good point, is that there is remote. And so if you're like, hey, look, we can move our business online, we don't have to pay for rent and a bunch of other expenses that don't really make sense, and we can hire a more diverse, more qualified like staff from across the nation, that could make a lot of sense. I know I'm sitting here in like a brick and mortar office, but I technically don't need to be. And so I think that those are some of the expenses that like businesses will reconsider in the future. Like travel is probably not a useful expense. I know for Social Security and stuff, all the hearings at this point are remote, and that's like $500 in reimbursements, you know, for each person that has to travel for a hearing, and a bunch of like, you know, fuel and whole kinds of stuff that like just doesn't really exist, and that can save a bunch of time. And so I think Cynthia asked, what percentage of businesses are working or offering remote in the area? I think it's a reasonable amount, unless you're like, at PNL or something potentially. There's, I don't think it's a lot, but it's maybe like, a standard amount, maybe 30% or so. And I think that's way more than it used to be, because people see that COVID is just one piece of the timeline. This isn't going to be like the only event that we have that's going to shut businesses down. So far is what at least mastermind groups are thinking. And so we have to at least strategize for what the next thing comes. Questions or concerns or anything so far?
Just
So
reading a little bit of the comments as we keep going through. I like the interaction. Thank you, Cynthia, for participating.
oh, Cynthia's getting a gift card for sure. Okay, so that's just one piece of how to finance it. Would be to go to a bank or a private money lender, or to do factoring. If you're really going to go look for like actual debt financing, you could go talk to like people who work with you, like shareholders and things like that. There could be some easy money there. In terms of another road to financing would be giving away pieces of your company. That can be expensive if your company is not doing well now, but is going to do really well later, and you're about to give 20% of it away. Or you might give away too much, and so some of those pieces are really hard to figure out. And then on the back end, you have to go convince the investor that your company is worth investing in. So you have to think about like not giving away too much of the value of what the company could be, but then also going to convince this guy to give you a bunch of money because the company is really valuable. And so it's a really, really hard game sometimes. Sometimes those things are really easy to see. Like you have somebody who's like manufacturing garage door gates, and they're already selling a bunch. They have revenue and they got manufacturing set up. Okay, sure, yeah, I'll buy into that. Sometimes it's way harder to see, like tech companies that are developing like smart drones to go look over ag. Like, is this one going to be the company that takes off, or is it going to be other ones? It's a little bit harder to figure out if there really is value there.
And I think that, one of the things that I find often is that this world of equity financing, it's regulated, right? There's securities involved. The SEC gets involved. Martha Stewart Prison gets involved if we don't do things right. And so we try to find a way, both Josh and I deal in this space often. And I've never found a client that's talked to me too early about wanting to potentially sell equity. Most of the time, at least 60% of the time, I'm a little late to the show, and they've had conversations or made promises or thought about the solution in a way that makes it hard for us to stay compliant. And sometimes it's bad enough that we have to kind of undo things and redo it with the compliant framework. And so if this is something that's on people's radar, and they're even if it's three buddies that want to get together and buy a building together, right? There's securities involved because you're getting money from people that are not yourselves, and there's a lot easier to be compliant, but it's also something that should be checked out and make sure that we have all the details buttoned down.
Agreed. Yeah, because getting to a place where things aren't in writing is really hard. So if you are giving pieces of your ownership for money, and there's actually money exchanging hands, you can come talk to us for free. Just it'll be like a confession. We won't charge you anything, and we'll just listen. But it's worth talking to an attorney about, just because you can't entirely tell what you've done sometimes, unfortunately. So there are other ways to get money, potentially, right? So these are like weird ways. This could be doing a promissory note that might be convertible. So going to somebody and saying, hey, will you give me $100,000? I'll pay you back. And if I don't pay you back, you can have 10% of my company. So it's kind of debt and equity to some extent. And it comes with its own securities rules, just like Reuben said. There's other ways that companies potentially make money. So we just did an acquisition of where a company went and acquired another like revenue stream. And so the bank said, we'll finance that because here's all their AR. And so, you can go acquire them for this money and we know that you'll at least be able to pay it back. We've been lucky enough to work with credit unions and see some of those considerations on the back end too. So that's been pretty fun.
And I think that, one of the things that's underutilized, at least on the small business front from my perspective, is that there's a lot of local credit union banks and smaller community banks that have SBA money to lend, and they can't find a place to put it right now. It's a lot of money out on the market. And I think if clients are needing a little bit of money, 50 grand, 100 grand, a bank is a good solution. And you just have to be able to present the bank a little bit of, just clean yourself up a little bit, put your financials together, put a little proposal together and say, look, this is what we're doing. We're making muffins at the lemonade stand, and we need some capital. And here's our revenue, and here's our profits, and here's our margins. And so again, I wouldn't go past the debt financing just because it has to deal with banks. I'd look for those local credit unions and those local community banks to really help you out.
Great. Hey, Reuben, so at what stage of a business do you usually recommend analyzing, like whether to finance with debt or selling, a part of the company through equity, or doing a combination of both? Or
yeah, I mean, honestly, I find that most people have enough cash if they're going to start a business that what they call bootstrap it, right? They just pull it out of their own pockets and keep the money going until they start making traction. And then they get a little bit of an investor. They have some friend or some parent or some expert that wants to invest and says, hey, this is a good idea. Let me give you some money for 10 or 15% of your company. And then what we do is we leverage that chunk of money that comes in, and we go get a little more debt so that it's kind of a multiplication effect. But I honestly think that it's kind of like the same question with insurance, right? Like, you don't need insurance if you don't have much to lose. And you don't need capital unless you have a place to spend it. So I usually say, hey, let's put a plan together on what you're going to spend your money on. And then we can decide whether the dollar amount requires us to go outside or whether it's something that can be justified by the revenue to go to bank. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yeah, that plan is so perfect because, my recommendation is borrow everything you can that you need for your business while you can. Because, there's a point where you might not be able to borrow, or business is impacting your credit because you don't want to pay a vendor because they never delivered the stuff. And so make a plan, see how much you need, and borrow as much as you can while your credit's perfect. And then go do your business just in case, because you don't want to get to a point where your credit's not perfect and then you're taking debt at less than like amazing terms. You could have just got everything you needed.
And there is, if I'm looking for like outside factors, just the other thing, like if you're busy enough that you can't work on growing your business and all you can do is spend time in your business, then it's probably time to expand. It's time to hire. It's time to find another because it's working, right? And if it's working, then then it's just a matter of timing about when to pull the trigger. But I think that's a good hallmark of, I'm too busy. I can't spend time doing, my bookkeeping anymore. I can't spend time with anything but actually working in my business because I got so much going on. I use that as my kind of red flag. My clients tell me that, I go, okay, let's sit down and talk a minute. I got a business coach for you. I have somebody that maybe could help you with some financing. Let's talk about growth.
Yeah, that's right. Either it's not outsourcing enough or it's time to grow. And that's a nice organic way to do it, which is really, really fun.
Yeah.
No, so that makes a lot of sense. Any other questions or concerns or anything so far? So just wanted to provide at least a cost benefit analysis so we can see what's going on. In real life, I think it was, okay, so I liked Anonymous's question too, in real life, because to me, to some extent, you build a business, you get enough debt to generate revenue, to build value to the business, and you build that value as far as you can until you need more money, which I think is what Reuben was saying. Then the equity is worth enough so that you're not giving away a ton of the company, right? And so most of the time, that's kind of what we see. Not always, but to some extent that keeps you from giving away 50% of the business up front or more. Is that unfair, Reuben?
No, I think that's the right answer.
Because I mean, here's the real life. Like, equity, it could be cheap, maybe it's easy, but that third line is control. And so at some point, not only are you giving away like potential future revenue, but you're giving away the say of the company. And those things are hard to part with, especially if you've like done all the stuff in the middle and started it and grown it through debt and you have revenue and you have a business. It's hard to say, yeah, here's 30% of my company, go tell me what to do. That kind of sucks. So, like evaluating what this looks like, and then to some extent, I like safes or kisses or promissory notes or other equity type agreements that at least give you a way out potentially. Unless you know that this person is Elon Musk and he's going to help you promote your company, then you should give him 80% of your company. And so some of those things are very different. If you're going to have a board member or whatever that's going to accelerate your company into the market and make you millions of dollars, then some of these things are less serious considerations.
And I find that the hardest balance for most of my clients is that they, especially when they're taking outside money, is that there's no guarantee that new money will come in, or that you'll be able to take more money from the individual that's already given it to you one time. And so make sure the deal's a good deal, and run that scenario as you're thinking about it. Like, well, let's say I use up all this money and I need more. What's the likelihood of them giving me more? Well, probably less, right? If you need it after, or maybe you didn't ask for enough and you need a little more, so you don't have to run the risk of running out. I think the control issues, I make clients or the investors write a pretty big check on the control side of things. Yeah. But I think you can balance it with some creative legal work and some of the funnest conversations I've had between an investor and a company and their exciting growth path, and coming up with a good solution to make sure everybody's excited to move forward together.
That's a really good point. And they also have to write a big check if the terms of their investments are going to deter future investors. Like if you want preference rights and all these kinds of things, that's going to make it hard for me to get other money, then that has to be a lot of money. Even if it's a loan, and there's ridiculous terms, like you're going to take first priority liens and stuff, then it has to be like significant. Is that it? Yeah. So, once we're in the expansion channel, at least, and we know that we're going to do it, there's a couple of factors that you have to manage. One is we're now expanding, so we're working a lot on the business. We're going to maybe add employees and revenue and a whole bunch of stuff. We also have to sustain the growth that we had before. So sustaining that growth through the expansion is really hard. It's just something you have to make a plan for, because it's extra work for sure. We also have to make sure that expansion doesn't mess with the current cash flow we need. So again, like projected financials and stuff. Then we have to make sure that expansion doesn't kill our culture. I do think that is a big key to expanding successfully, is that having the employees on the back end that you had on the front end, because now they've learned a lot and they've worked for your business and they're owners for your business, hopefully, not just people who are checking in and checking out at normal times. They really want to invest in that growth. So I think having the culture is important, and then knowing if you really are going to want to go put in this effort for the next 18 to 24 months, it's a ride. It's going to be worth it on the back end, but are you okay now, or do you really want to go push? So to that end, this is kind of what we see is, growth can be a killer. You have too many orders, you don't know how to fill them, you can't put the employees in enough. The culture is not great, so people are leaving, and you can't train and get new ones in fast enough. That can be really hard. So making sure all those pieces align down the road does take some work, and it's work on like things that I wouldn't necessarily expect. It's work on like culture documents and work on employee documents, and just work on like trainings and things that might feel less tangible.
I call those things, sort of legal and compliance debt, right? Like if you don't put a handbook together that's really customized to your business, and you're hiring your 5th or 6th employee, and the thing you hand them has been, cut off of Google or some generic, and there starts to be these interpersonal issues or dynamics in leadership and training, then you have that debt to pay then, and it's just a lot harder. And so it's much easier to put it together at the beginning and really set your policies to match your culture.
Or you can put it together while we're litigating over employee wages.
That's not the right answer.
It's not the right answer, but we can't do it. But I mean, we see a lot of that stuff too, unfortunately. And so to the second point here, you didn't write it down. Some of the other stuff from growth is taxes. The government doesn't want you to work. I don't know if you knew that. They don't want you to start businesses or work. They make it really hard. And so a lot of times when you expand, you might expand, but not cover all of the taxes for some kind of vendor or some other bills to do later. And so I think that that's okay in some senses, but you just have to make sure that you're tax efficient and that someone's keeping up with the taxes or there's plans on the back end as well. Write everything down. Reuben, go ahead.
No, I totally agree with you. Keep going, my friend.
A lot of times, just check your name. If nothing else, today and you're starting a new business, just send us your name and we'll run it to the US PTO, the Patent and Trademark Office. Because if you actually start a business and it takes off and you expand and you're awesome, and you get a cease and desist letter because you can't use your name or your logo, that's so sad. It's really, really sad. And so, I like to check that stuff up front just in case. I mean, if it's based on your brand, if you're providing consulting services that's really not about your brand, that's about you, maybe that's different. But if you're building something about a brand, it's worth checking up front.
And I think that, a lot of clients, they fall in love. It's a hard choice for them, right? They're the creative ones and they spend a lot of time and energy and they fall in love with it. And then, somebody is a dream killer there. And I tell all my clients, like, hey, don't fall in love until we've done the check, right? And I agree. That's super important.
Sometimes we check and we see that there's an issue, there's a conflict, but they're like, file it anyway. Let's see.
Just go for it.
And sometimes it works. So, it's at least worth knowing what you're getting into and what's going on down the road. And I think as we spoke about earlier, one of the biggest mistakes I see is business owners who don't think they have the money to outsource. Because there's a CPA who can do it way faster and way better than you, and will let you go actually be creative and do things that don't drain your soul. Some of that stuff I think is really important to not only free up your time to go do business stuff, but also for your mental and emotional health too. So that you can be a business owner and still remember sort of what you like doing. So I think the outsourcing is really important. I don't think you need to outsource everything. I don't think you need a financial consultant, a business coach, a life coach, a business coach. There could be a line there, but there's some key things that are worth outsourcing. It's good to have a lawyer just around. It's good to have a CPA just around. It's good to sort of have an insurance guy just around.
And
so
if somebody doesn't have those connections, right? I tell all of my clients, and I want to put you on the spot here. If somebody called you up and said, hey, I need a good insurance guy, do you have a couple people that you could send them to?
Yeah, so we have one that's reasonably priced with a lot of people, a lot of brokers on the market, and one that's very expensive and very good. We have middle ground. Yeah, absolutely. And
right.
So I think if you get those options, you should be able to interact with society and know what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that I don't charge my clients for those kind of phone calls, and I like sharing good people, and giving them business. And so if we could be a resource for anyone, whether that's locally in the Tri-Cities or in the neighboring states, Pacific Northwest, we have a pretty large network and we know who's good and who's not good. And so if there's questions like that, reach out to us. It's love to help.
That's fair, because there are some banks that I wouldn't work with and other things. Not SDCU, of course.
Kevin jumping in here.
No, but no, it's true. I think that there is employees these days want more. They want culture. They want to feel taken care of and cared about, and it's sort of they get to some extent. But I think that if you're expanding or moving on and you're forgetting about the employees who got you there, you're going to spend a lot of money training new ones and trying to get the same level of ownership into the company. employees just, also making sure that everything's registered, that you have at will, like offer letters and all that stuff's sort of in line. And then on the back end, once you've made it, doing all the legal, financial, and all of those debts, including managing bad debts, taking care of taxes and stuff. There are not a lot of businesses, there are not a lot of startups that I work with that don't have some kind of bad debt or factoring or something going on in the back end, or like we have to figure out, like we have to rewrite all their corporate documents. Like, so I don't think that you getting to the next level and not having that stuff is a bad thing. Like, just let somebody just outsource it so somebody can clean it up for you, so that it's not always a bad thing. Reuben, do you see anything different? I mean,
no, I mean, it's the same stuff there. I think that, one of my clients tend to have this idea when they get into the situation where they have debts, is that if you ignore it, it'll go away. And that's not the right answer. Like, you have to communicate, and if you can't pay, you can't pay. Or if you're working on a big order and you're going to be able to pay in 2 or 3 months, like, transparency and communication are your best answer, right? Like, hiding from it is just not going to work. I find that in life, and this works in the legal field as well, if you think if there's something you don't want to talk about because it's difficult, that's probably the conversation you should be having.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And if it's not the conversation you want to have, then outsource it, because then we can handle that, so that at least it's not killing you while you're like growing revenue.
Yeah, and that often I tell my clients, like, look, just blame the lawyer. Start the conversation off with, so my lawyer is giving me a hard time about X, Y, and Z, and we need to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's, I could take the blame. I can handle it.
But then, so that, yeah, I agree. Okay, I will keep that in mind. Thanks, Reuben. So, but if you're a business and you have bad debts, or you're trying to manage debts, or you're trying to figure out taxes, or like where to get money, like, you are not alone. So just full disclosure, at least now after COVID, everyone's trying to put stuff together. Whether you're a startup, you've been around for a while, like, everyone's trying to put stuff together. So you're definitely not alone. And that also doesn't necessarily preclude expansion either. So it's a weird conversation. So in real life, how do you expand? A ton of money, ton of time, both of those up front. And then I think, potentially you got some potential for the next level. And that's the part that's so hard about expansion, unless you're like sort of fintech, or, I mean, even for a lot of like the blockchain guys, to some extent, it's always time and money up front, and you're hoping to get to the next level. And that's the hard one, is you really have to, at that point, like what you do and believe in what you do, and have it outsourced enough to not be burnt out or mentally burdened. Because part of the expansion, at least, just to some extent, is about keeping ownership and C-suite and those folks around and motivated too. So full disclosure, you have to know if it's worth it. If it's worth it to you, if you really want to do it, if you're comfortable right now, if you're going to be willing to catch up on the back end and outsource stuff. And, I mean, I talk with clients now who are like, I used to write checks for $3,000, and now I write checks for $140,000. And it's just like, at some point, you just sort of close your eyes, you hope it's going to happen. And you just push and push. So it is hard. And I think that the real question is, personally, what's your goal? It can be a goal for a business and a whole bunch of stuff, but if you're the owner in the C-suite and you're pushing something forward, it also has to be about you.
And I think that, I find this goes back to like your why. Like, why did you get in business in the first place? And why are you, stressing or feeling about all of this, growth? Why don't you just go get a W-2 job at, job somewhere? And I think if you can go back to your why, you can kind of put some of these questions in perspective. And I think that helps you just kind of always remember why you got started. And if you've lost that, or if you think that's got muddled with your goals, then that's a good check.
Yep, agreed. I think it's important to say here that COVID has been surprisingly hard for everybody. for business owners, for employees, for like humans. And so like, I think everyone's sort of feeling that. And so, yeah, I think that the health and the emotional stuff, that's important. So there's a couple tricks here that we see, let expansion pay for itself. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you can get an investor because your product's good and the investor will bring money up front and they'll fund the whole thing, which is pretty cool. Or sometimes you'll bring a deal in that's bringing revenue and the bank will pay for it. Or, maybe there's real estate or something that the bank can use as a security there. So that happens, not always. Definitely, at least at minimum, outsource accounting and compliance, because those are the things that usually go wrong expensively. I don't know if that's fair, but yeah, those are the things that take money and time to fix on the back end. If you're running a business and you have employees, I would definitely recommend key person insurance, which is insurance for like the owners, basically, if something happens to them. So that either there's money to close the business or money for partners to buy them out. But it's not a hard stop on a business. Because if you are running your own business and you have a family, I would definitely recommend life insurance and an estate plan and some kind of continuity plan, if I can say it, because those things are important.
And one of the things on the insurance piece, Josh, and there's different types and there's, different thoughts of this, but I think that there's a connection when you use a CPA or you use a lawyer, all right, you also get to leverage their insurance if something goes completely south, right? Yeah. And so part of the outsourcing is leveraging other people's insurance. And I think that sometimes that gets lost in the idea of why am I paying this lawyer so much money or this accountant so much money? Well, first off, there's got to be value, but secondly, there's a safety net there that you can leverage. So.
And if you don't have to look at like bank reconciliations and for me, financial statements or tax forms, like I would pay almost. Like I know that's a personal flaw, but I am so done on it. It hurts me as a human. So I would definitely recommend estate planning and key insurance. And then debt financing is not fun. A lot of people do it. So if you're going to go get a loan, just make sure it's going to be enough to get you there, and make sure the terms are right, and check on personal guarantees and some of those things. This is my favorite. I think it's Reuben's favorite, actually.
It is.
And I would definitely say get, but don't always listen to lots of opinions. Definitely collect a lot of them, but at least 80% of them are just wrong. So, and also maybe wrong for you. But it's always good to know what people have done and what's out there. So I don't think it's useful to be afraid of opinions, at least on that end. Be flexible, be open to change, remote work. This isn't going to be the last COVID, I don't think. So hopefully, yeah. And then as Reuben and I were chatting about earlier, sell before you want to sell. When your business is doing really well, that's usually the time to start thinking about selling, because you don't want to get to a point where at least like tech or industry or something has moved on so far that your business doesn't have too much value anymore. So definitely thinking about when the selling and what the retirement looks like is worthwhile. Anything you want to add, Reuben?
No, I mean, you've been very, very thorough, my friend. These are great tricks. I think that businesses is up and down. It can go fast, it can go slow, but always keep yourself humble to learn from people. There's so many good people out there that have done this path before, and if you're just a learner, you'll find the stuff you need to learn.
That's true. Expansion is scary. It's useful. It's super fun if you can pull it off, and for the most part, it's how like folks make a ton of money. So in that sense, I think it's worth it if you're willing to go like put in the time and figure it out. And hopefully you're surrounding yourself by a bunch of people who are very different from you and have different opinions that they can give, but you don't always have to listen to. But then you get like a full spectrum of what's going on and what the future looks like. We've worked through a ton of expansions. I know a bunch of people have. It's always a lot of fun. So I think at this point, that's what we have. So if anybody has questions, concerns, anything they want to chat about generally, let us know. Otherwise, we can definitely talk more.
It's what we do. My wife also agrees that I talk way too much. So we'd love to take some questions.
All right, so very engaging. I like the comments and the questions in Zoom. So if anyone has any questions for Reuben or Josh, going once, going twice, here's where that counter could come into play.
Yeah,
again.
it's true. It's true. No, but also, you know, there's going to be a point where a question's going to come up and they're going to be like, I wish I would have asked that when I had the moment. That's why we have our details here. Screenshot that, reach out to us. If you send me a hard question, I'll send it to Josh. If it's easy, I'll take it. And we'll love to help out in any way we can.
All right, well, I'll just reiterate that for everyone, you know, this recording is going to be up on our Facebook page later today and YouTube. So if you need to come back and rewatch it and maybe a question comes up, you'll definitely have access to their contact information. So with that, I just want to say thank you to our speakers, Josh and Reuben, both. This was a fantastic presentation and really well put together. It's very hard to sometimes understand topics such as this, and I think you both did a great job putting it together in a very concise way. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to STCU, and we will be back next month with another Ask the Expert. So stay tuned for more details on that session. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and thank you again, everyone, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.